Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmidt. Today, we're going to talk about something that people are always asking about. How do I motivate my team? So this is, in theory, you think, oh, should be easy. I just say, hey, go team, let's go, and we're good. But the reality is we're very complex beings, and to find ways to motivate even ourselves, let alone our team members who we can't get inside their brains, can be tough. But it's simpler if we try these things. So I'm going to help you out with some of that today. So I want to talk first about what we tend to think motivation is. So most of us will start thinking about like the carrot or the stick sort of thing. So, right? So we're going to dangle a carrot like a reward in front of you. Or we're going to say, hey, that wasn't right. And we're going to hit you with the stick, the proverbial stick. So those are ways to motivate. But the problem is that eventually, if it's the same carrot that's hanging out or just maybe a different carrot, different flavor, different day, eventually it loses its luster or it becomes an expectation. So now you expect it to be there no matter what. So very simplistic example, when I first moved to the plant that I was at in Canada, I copied something that we did in the summer months because it was very hot. And I said, oh, let's have some freezies available because they're nice, they're a treat. And people were super pumped about it at the beginning. So I wasn't trying to motivate anybody. I was just trying to say, hey, we know it's hot out there. Cool down, have some sugary water because, it's good. And so it was like everybody really liked it at first, but then it randomly got hot in April and people were complaining one time that they weren't there because that became an expectation. And you know what? Our bad for not checking the weather and not having that in place already because obviously we weren't thinking about that part of the system yet. But it became an expectation. So it wasn't a motivator anymore. It now became almost a demotivator because that expectation and that need or that perceived need did not get met. All right. So it's a little, I can't think of the words today, but little tickler about what's coming. The other side of that, the stick, right? So if you're constantly just being reprimanded or getting punished or something removed from you for not doing something right or not doing it, now you're not going to do any extra. So it becomes demotivating in that it doesn't push anymore. It just pushes you not to try harder. And that is because we don't want to get reprimanded. So I'm going to do exactly what you tell me to do and no more. I might do a little less if you don't come after me about it, but it's not effective in the long term. So I want to talk a bit about that as well. So when we're talking about types of motivation, sometimes we do just need a spurt of motivation. And so that's where these things will come in handy when you're saying, okay, we have something, it is different, it's out of the ordinary, it's out of the norm, and we need to motivate people to do this little extra thing this one time. Now that it can be effective because it's a short-term motivation. But when we really think about our teams, we need to think about long-term motivation because it's not a sprint. It's a marathon, not a sprint, as we used to say in college all the time. And it is a marathon, right? We need to be motivated every single day when we come to work, 5 days a week or whatever our work schedule might be. But we need to show up motivated to do our jobs, motivated to take on a problem that may not be our problem, but it's the team's problem. So we have to be motivated to do something with it. So that's where it becomes important to have a longer, steady state motivation. And that's when we start talking about the different types of internal motivation versus external motivation, or intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. So our carrots and our sticks are extrinsic. And that's because the reward is coming from outside, or the consequence is coming from outside. Now, I had somebody in a program with me one time. They're like, whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic, it's all still reward, carrot, or stick. And it's like, you're right. You are not wrong, because we do things based on what we think the consequences are going to be. So there's this ABC model that I learned many, many moons ago. So it's antecedent. So you set an expectation, right? You have a behavior, and then there's a consequence. Okay. And the consequence can be good or bad. So the problem is like a lot of times leaders will observe a behavior and then we'll come back. Oh, remember the expectation is this. Remember we have to do this. And then they still see the same behavior, but there's no consequence. So if there's no consequence to a bad behavior, you can say the antecedent or the expectation all day long, but you're still not going to get a consequence to it, and you're still not going to change the behavior. But if you have set the expectation, you have a behavior, then there's a consequence, good or bad. Say, hey, that was awesome. I love how you did this, that, and the other thing. Or, hey, that wasn't right. Remember, the expectation is this. Make sure you do it this way the next time. Okay. Now you have a consequence, so people will change their behavior. So it's still like this with motivation when we're talking about how to motivate our team, because that is effectively how we motivate the team. But the problem with this extrinsic level of that is that it's now dependent on other people, and it can very easily become that demotivator because we're not inside their brain, and that reward or that consequence isn't going to hit the same way, or it's going to lose its luster because now it's a reward or a consequence. So when we're talking about intrinsic motivation, this is what we want. This is that thing, that internal need that needs to be met, because that is how people are motivated. It's by meeting needs. So how do we understand the needs of our team? I'm coming to that, so just wait. But when we're talking about motivation, we need to start looking at the overall person that we're looking at. And we need to understand that it's not, hey, we want them to do this, therefore they must do this, or we must do this before or after to get them motivated. It is not that simple. We are very complex beings who need different types of motivation based on the day, based on the time. And this is why we need it to come from inside. So we need to understand the needs of our people. We need to make sure they're being met on a regular basis. And we need to make sure that we're saying, hey, great job. And we are acknowledging the fact that their needs are being met, they're being motivated, and they're being taken care of. So I want to talk about needs, because a lot of people, they think they're like, why do I have to meet their needs? I'm giving them a paycheck. I tell them what to do. I can say good job, or I can say not good job. What is this needs thing? Why is everybody so needy? The thing is needs are not needy. Needs are just things that we need. We need water. We need light. We need social interaction sometimes, some of us more than others. So different people are going to have different needs based on how they're made up. So we talk a bit about this in Working Genius. So we talk about how we are all made somewhat differently, and we possess two things that we are intrinsically made to do in this world. So those are our geniuses. And we also don't possess two other ones that might bring us a lot of frustration. So in terms of needs being met, if we have, say, like I do, the need or the geniuses of enablement and discernment, then I'm going to need to want to help people, and I'm going to need to want to use my gut. But the other part of that is around those those geniuses we have these things that we crave, and those are part of those needs. And so I want to say it this way as a crave, not a need, because sometimes people think needy. But let's think about a craving. Let's think about when you crave chocolate. Do you need an entire chocolate cake? Or would just that taste of chocolate just satiate you over? I'm not talking about gluttony, right? Like sometimes we want the whole cake, but maybe just like a glass of chocolate milk or that little piece of chocolate candy would just satiate that sweet tooth enough that, hey, I'm good. I'm not constantly just thinking about chocolate. But if I try to ignore that little craving and just say, I don't need it, I don't need it, I don't need it, I might eat everything else under the sun trying to meet that need. And then I become needy, right? So when we don't meet the cravings of our team or those needs, those innate needs that they're going to have, when we don't meet them, now that person becomes needy. Think about the members of your team. Do you have somebody who every time you come to talk to them, it now becomes a 30-minute, like, just talk about anything and everything except work? Yeah, I bet you do. I have to say that I think I was one of those people to my boss at some point in time because I had a need for some social interactions that weren't being met. And that wasn't his job to do, but maybe he should have said, hey, you know what, he could have given me some feedback on that probably. But at the same time, some of that relationship building, some of the time on a regular basis, would actually given me enough of it and help the creativity that we had in creating our systems and creating, new projects that we were working on. And in fact, it did help when we were able to kind of brainstorm and have that kind of connection of socialization, but making sure that needs are met on a regular basis so that it doesn't become this overly needy thing. So when we're talking about needs of people, so when we meet the needs, what we don't want to do is ignore those needs because, as I said, with a craving, if you don't meet the craving, now you want everything else. So we have a very simple thing that we talk about in a couple of our training programs, and it's about filling the bucket. All right. So let's imagine you have a bucket and it is filled with, when I do it, I put Legos in it because I have an abundance of Lego in my home. So it's filled with your Lego. Okay. So you have a bucket full of Lego and somebody asked you for a piece of Lego. You're like, yeah, sure. I can give you a piece of Lego. I got a whole bunch. And, I know I'm going to get a little bit more in a bit. So yeah, I can give you a couple. Do you need a couple? Okay, that's cool. And that's what we want, right? We want our team members to be able to say, hey, yeah, I can give you a little bit of my time. I'm not going to get more time, obviously, or I can give you a little bit of my effort because I know someone else is going to support me in a little bit. Or I know that need is going to be met. I know that I'm going to get my needs met. So therefore, I don't mind sharing because my bucket is full. Now let's take it the other way. Let's say I have one piece of Lego in my bucket. It's pretty empty. I have no idea when I'm going to get more. I'm going to need more. I'm going to have to go dig some up or dig through the trash. Maybe somebody threw some away or that bottom of the drawer. I know sometimes they spill. So I'm going to dig through those drawers. And I'm going to try to find them. But now you come and ask for my Lego. I don't think I can spare that Lego. I don't really want to. My bucket is so empty. Can you see that? So now we're not able to help. Now we're not able to give that extra motivation. Right? So this is where the motivation thing comes in. When we don't keep the buckets, our proverbial buckets full, which means when we don't meet the needs of our team members or our needs as a leader are not being met, it's hard to give. And it's not like giving Lego. It's giving of our effort, our time, our motivation. Hey, you've only got 8 hours in a day. How much more effort can you give towards these special projects, emergencies that come up, or needs of my team? How many more things can I give you? And my bucket is drained. I have no energy. I'm going to go home and just flop on the couch and my kids are going to be like, why aren't you talking to me? Right? So there's consequences to not having our needs met or keeping our buckets full. Big consequences. So let's talk reality. How do we understand how to keep our team members' buckets full? How do we understand how to keep our own buckets full? So the first step I want you to do is I want you to understand your bucket filling needs. So take some time, reflect. If you're not driving right now or you have a minute, you're not actually doing anything, close your eyes and think about a time when you were super motivated. You actually had a sustained level of energy to complete a project or to work on a certain task or to just carry you through like this whole week. Like, what was happening around you? What sort of things were you getting or maybe not getting, right? Sometimes things drain us very fast. So what sort of things were you doing and what sort of things were you getting? So after you take some time to look at that, make sure you're considering what type of work you're doing. Make sure you're considering your work environment. You might consider, what's been going on around. Was there something at home? Was there a really cool thing that was happening or a really exciting thing or a very prominent deadline or just something in there? So something in there was working. Now I want you to reflect the other side. I want you to think of a time when you struggled to start. When you started, it was like, oh, I just can't. I can't do anything right now. And I want you to take those same considerations. What was happening around that time frame? What was happening, in your personal life? What was happening at work? Was there a deadline that you didn't like? Was there a project you didn't like? What type of work you were doing? How was your team being? What stresses were there? Okay, so take some of that reflection time and journal about it, pray about it, do what works for you, and then start to notice it even just throughout your day. Like, what sort of things are you excited to do versus what things do you just avoid and you not want to start? And start to consider what types of things those are. So to get very practical, if you know your working genius, that's a good indicator. So that is one great way to do it. After reflection, so you can reflect, you can do your working genius. And a third thing is something called a motivation code. Now, this is something that's new to me. I did it a few months back and it was eye-opening. So I almost see it like I love working genius because it is so simple and it is easy to do and it's easy to see and it's easy to implement. But now when you want to go one step deeper to really fully understand your motivators, then it's like, oh, I now get what this is all about. So it gives you just one more level of clarity. Definitely not as simple, not as easy, but it is there is like, oh, okay. So I wonder if you can guess it, but I know there's a lot of motivators that are in there, but my number one motivator is evoke recognition. So in some ways, it makes sense why I absolutely love doing podcasts and why I like speaking and why I really enjoy doing training sessions because I can see people's responses. I can't see people's responses in podcasting, but I like them anyway. I'm sharing this message, which is one of my other ones. So sharing the vision is also another one that is motivator. So when I get to share these things with people, it makes me innately happy. So that I believe is like my enablement showing up in that way. So it's like, it's another level that shows me to be very motivated and it helps me. So I can use that to motivate myself and to better understand myself. And when I look at team members, I can use that to help understand them. So doing it for yourself first is key because as the leader, you're leading by example, but you need to understand what motivates you so you can stay motivated, but B, so that you can understand the complexities that come around motivation. Right? It's not so simple as just saying, okay, what do you need? No one's going to know that, right? I don't know that for myself all the time. But when I can take a moment, quickly assess, okay, well, clearly this is not a very motivating task. So I'm going to try to do it in spurts, or I like recognition. So I'm going to see if I can tell someone about it when I'm done, or something along those lines, like putting it out there in a way that can motivate you. So when you start to understand what works for you, you can help your team better. And you can also develop some empathy because you understand when it's hard to find that motivation thing, because inevitably we're going to have to work in our demotivators, and we're going to have to do things around that, and it's going to drain us. So we have to learn to work with that as well. The key is we don't want to spend all of our time in our demotivators or our frustrations. So if you want to learn more about M Code, I will stick a link back there for a wonderful coach, or down in the show notes for an amazing coach, Laura Rowland, and you can reach out to her to get that. I don't sell it. I don't do it. I probably never will, because it's it's very complicated, but it is amazing. So it's a great tool. So tying that in with your working genius is beautiful. So the second thing that I would like you to do for understanding how to motivate your team is to start holding one-on-ones with them. So when I say one-on-ones, I don't mean, oh, hey, how's it going? Yeah. As you swing by the water cooler, or, grab your lunches out of the fridge, or whatever it is. That's not a one-on-one. So I get told a lot from clients. They're like, I talk one-on-one with these guys all the time. We're always on the phone. We're talking about this thing, that thing, the other thing. And we get into a couple of other topics. And it's like, that's great. But remember, with the Lego situation, if your bucket's kind of empty and you don't know when you're going to get another one, or say you've been giving a lot of Lego out, and you're not sure when you're going to get another piece or another onslaught of pieces, it can get demotivating once you hit that halfway point, right? So it's important to have scheduled time that is pre-planned and is dedicated to kind of bucket filling activities, right? So it's really, what we're doing is we're checking in on those people. So an agenda for those would be, hey, how's it going? What's doing well today? What's going well for you today? Or what are you feeling good about? So great way to open it up, because now, they can talk about something positive. And sometimes people, especially early on, are going to gloss that over. Oh, everything's fine. Everything's great. So now you can ask them the other side of that is, well, what's not going well? And try to get them oh, you really want to know about these things, right? And so get them thinking. And then as they get used to it, they'll get used to the rhythm, and they'll understand that you're a safe space for them to come to when they're struggling. Or you're a safe space for them to come to when they're just really excited about something that might be trivial, but you know what? It's super exciting to them, and they want to share it. Because maybe they're like me and have an evoked recognition and can't help themselves but try to tell people everything. So it's such a key piece to understanding and really getting to understand the needs of your team. And it's important to do it well. So I want to reiterate that the goal behind those things is not to talk about the task list that the person has. The goal is a check-in with that person. It's some one-on-one time that you're spending with that person to get to know them, to get to understand their needs so you can better motivate them. I'll give you another real world example. So think back in say high school or something, and you're hanging out with a bunch of friends, right? And maybe there's somebody you're kind of interested in, either, is becoming more friends or more than friends, right? So how do you get to know them better? You go spend time one-on-one, and you go chat, or you go to dinner, or you do something outside the group. Because when you're in the group, you're in one mode. And when you're in one-on-one, you're in another mode. And it's just easier to converse. You're going to deepen that relationship more. So I always say, hey, it's like G-rated dating, right? So it is important in all relationship steps. And when you're trying to really understand how to fill your team's buckets, this is a great way. And it's also a great way to share with them and be vulnerable and have them understand, okay, this is what fills my bucket and this is what drains my bucket too. So it is a great time for that sharing and that relationship building, which is so key to having empathy and trust, which all leaders need to be able to build with their team to be successful and to motivate their team. So if you would like to learn more about motivation, how to keep the buckets filled of your team, how to better motivate them, reach out to me. Go check out my website. We've got some amazing programs. Thrive, which is a huge leadership program. It's a 6-month program where you're really going to see some huge transformational behavior changes in yourself and your team. So I've just had a program start. I'm starting today as far as recording. I believe this is going up tomorrow. So started yesterday. So if you jump on the bandwagon quickly, I might be able to squeeze you in. But if you're interested in bringing it into your team, which is really the way you're going to make a bigger impact, you're going to be able to get your whole team on board talking about bucket filling, talking about how to create safe spaces, talking about how do we look at problems in a real way that is really going to solve them. So if you really want to bring that in, if you want to make an impact on your culture and really on the results of your organization, bringing this in-house is the way to do it. So come in, do the 6-month program, or we have a shorter one, which is a 2-month, which is just based around difficult discussions, but we still talk about buckets. Get those into your business, because that's how you're going to see real change. When you start leading a certain way and your team is seeing you lead that way, and then they understand what it is you're doing so they can lead their teams that way, that is the impact that you're going to make. And it can carry over into home life. It carries over even into customer service and sales, because it's all relationship building, right? When we can understand what our customers' buckets need to be full, hey, they're going to be happier with us too. So if you're interested in any of that, hop on over to my website, KristinaSchmidt.ca. If you want to look at Thrive a little bit more in detail, it's /Thrive. If you just want to set up a meeting with me and let's have a chat, let's see where you and your team are and see what you need. It might just be, hey, let's do a working genius workshop because that's what makes sense. Or we can just talk through an issue and say, hey, yeah, you're on the right track. Let me know what help you need if you need anything. But just reach out. We'll have a quick chat and see how things are going. And again, if you liked this, share it with a friend. Share it because I really like to share the vision. Share it for me. But share it with a friend so that they can learn more about how to motivate their teams, their employees, and everybody can have their buckets full. So I will see you next time in the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about all things people and organizational wellness, because quality people and processes are at the heart of every successful business. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you know when new episodes are released. You can also follow me on Instagram at KristinaSchmidt.ca, where I share real-life tips to help in your leadership and life journey. To get one-on-one and team support with your leadership development, book a discovery call on my website at KristinaSchmidt.ca. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.